She was humming in the kitchen. That was my first real clue. Not the late nights. Not the secretive texts. Not even the new password on her phone. No, it was the humming. Soft. Thoughtless. Like her soul had been returned to her body after being on loan. Like happiness had crept back into her bones. Just not because of me. She stirred her coffee like it was just another Tuesday. Humming some old R&B melody I couldn't place. Tapping her nails on the counter like a teenage girl daydreaming about summer. Her back was to me. I watched her from the hallway, toothbrush still in my mouth, foam building, breath caught. She hadn't hummed in over a year. You think that sounds small. But when you live with someone, the absence of small things is what deafens you. She used to sing to the radio every morning while brushing her hair. Then one day, silence. Now, here she was, glowing like someone had rewired her. I wasn't that someone. Later that night, I opened her laptop while she was in the shower. I'd never done anything like that before. I didn't even know her password. But muscle memory betrayed her. She had typed it in front of me 100 times. First pet's name and her high school jersey number. It opened. And so did the gates of hell. The email subject read, "Last night felt like the first time all over again." I clicked. I read. I died. He called her Sunbeam. Said he couldn't wait to feel her heartbeat against his again. Said he missed the little scar on her shoulder. I didn't even know she had a scar on her shoulder. I stared at the screen while the water ran upstairs, steam swirling through the vents like ghosts coming to take my place. I closed the laptop, went into the kitchen, and opened every single drawer in the house. Looking for something, anything, that was still mine. I found a bottle opener I bought in college. A chipped mug from my first road trip. A magnet with my brother's face on it. But nothing with her name on it. Nothing with our name on it. Everything she touched had become neutral. Sanitized. Ready to be handed off to someone else. I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, I stood in front of the sink, stared at the pile of dishes she'd left like she always did, and whispered the words I never thought I'd say out loud. I'm not enough for her anymore. Not because I cheated. Not because I lied. Not because I changed. But because he made her sing again. I didn't sleep that night. I pretended I did. I turned off the light like always. Rolled over like always. Even muttered a half-hearted good night when she slid into bed next to me like her body hadn't just betrayed me with someone else. But the moment her breathing evened out, I opened my eyes and stared at the ceiling like it had answers etched into the drywall. I don't know what I was waiting for. A confession? A tearful apology in her sleep? Maybe I wanted her to whisper his name by accident, just to confirm I wasn't imagining any of this. But no, all I got was the sound of her slow, peaceful breathing, like guilt couldn't touch her. Like she'd already made peace with her decisions. Like I was just a ghost occupying the same bed. At 2:12 a.m., I slid out of bed and walked barefoot across the cold hardwood floors. I opened the closet and stared at our lives hanging there side by side. My clothes were shoved to the left, barely a quarter of the space. Her dresses and sweaters flowed across the rest like a wall. I hadn't noticed before how little room I actually had. Funny how betrayal makes you suddenly aware of your square footage. I pulled out a suitcase. Not to pack, just to see what it felt like in my hand. There's this silence that comes after you find out someone doesn't love you the way they used to. Not dramatic silence. Not screaming into a pillow silence. It's quieter than that. Like the world has gone on mute just for you. Like you're suddenly watching your life with captions on, and none of the words match what you're feeling. I went into the kitchen again. I opened the junk drawer. Everyone has one. The chaotic graveyard of batteries, dried out pens, random keys, expired coupons, loose change. Except this drawer didn't feel like ours anymore. It felt like I was rummaging through a stranger's life. A stranger who no longer needed me. I found an old receipt from our anniversary dinner last year. She'd ordered steak that night. I remember, because she never orders steak. But that night, she said, "Screw it. I'm celebrating us." That night, she held my hand across the table like she meant it. That night, I believed I was her only home. Now, I was holding proof that even memories rot when left out too long. Around 4 a.m., I sat at the kitchen table in the dark. No lights, no phone, just me, and the quiet, and the clock ticking like a countdown. She came downstairs eventually, sleepy, messy hair, hoodie that wasn't mine. She blinked at me like I was an anomaly. "What are you doing up?" she asked. I wanted to say, "I know." I wanted to say, "Tell me how long it's been." I wanted to say, "Was it my cooking? My job? My hands?" My silence. My loyalty? But all I said was, couldn't sleep. She made tea. Sat across from me. Didn't even ask what was wrong. That's when I realized she didn't feel guilty. She felt finished. Whatever part of her had loved me had already been packed away, mailed off, and received by someone else. That morning, she kissed my forehead like a nurse comforting a patient she was no longer trying to save. And when she left for work, I sat there for another hour. I didn't move. I didn't eat. I didn't cry. I just kept repeating the same sentence in my head like a prayer or a curse. Nothing in this house belongs to me anymore, not even the silence. 2 days after I found the email, I began doing something pathetic. I started counting how many times she smiled in a day, and whether any of those smiles were because of me. The tally was humiliating. She smiled 3 times that Thursday. Once at her phone, once at the mirror while applying lipstick, and once at the Uber driver when he pulled up and said her name. I watched from the living room window as she stepped in without even turning around to wave goodbye. When she used to drive herself to work, she'd forget something inside, her badge, her scarf, her earrings, and rush back in with this whirlwind energy that reminded me why I married her. Now she left on time. Every day, no rush, no chaos, no scent of her perfume lingering behind. The more perfect she became, the more I knew she wasn't mine anymore. That night, I asked her if she wanted to watch the documentary we had started a few weeks back. Her answer? I already finished it. Then, as if that wasn't enough of a slap, she added, "You fell asleep halfway through, remember?" Yeah, I remembered. I remembered falling asleep with my head on her lap, thinking we were fine. She didn't even pretend to care anymore. It became a ritual, almost. She would come home, toss her keys into the dish by the door, pour a glass of wine, and check her phone with the kind of urgency that no job requires. Then she'd shower. Then she'd either call someone while pacing in the bedroom with the door shut, or go out again with some vague excuse. Networking event, book club, late meeting. Always something that didn't quite invite questions. I never asked who she was talking to. I never asked where she was going. That's the part one hate most about myself. I wasn't just spineless. I was afraid of hearing the truth spoken out loud. Because once it's said, it becomes real. And I wasn't ready for real yet. Instead, I started sorting my tools. Organizing my side of the closet. Quiet things. Exit-shaped things. You know how pathetic it feels to zip your favorite jacket into a garment bag and pretend like it's just for storage? You don't pack to leave someone you love. You pack because you realize you've already been left, and staying is now just a slow kind of dying. The moment that broke me came on a Saturday afternoon. She was out, running errands, which used to mean grocery shopping or grabbing coffee. But she came home empty-handed, flushed, with wind-blown hair and the faintest smear of lipstick at the corner of her mouth. It wasn't the color she left wearing. I didn't say anything. But when she walked by me, she said something that made me almost fall apart. "Hey, I meant to text you earlier, sorry. Got sidetracked." Sorry. That was her one apology all week. But not for what mattered. Not for the silence. Not for the betrayal. Just for not texting me. A technicality. A throwaway gesture. She had stopped apologizing to me in any meaningful way because her real apologies, the ones that carried weight, were being given to someone else. Someone who mattered to her in the way I used to. That night, she fell asleep next to me like there wasn't a war in my chest. I lay awake again, memorizing the cracks in the ceiling. I tried to remember what her voice sounded like when she said she loved me, but all I could hear was her laughter from earlier in the day, muffled through the window, echoing off the driveway as she said goodbye to the same beige car that had dropped her off 2 blocks down. She didn't think I saw, but I did. I saw everything. And I said nothing, because I wasn't ready to leave yet. But I was finally ready to stop pretending I didn't know. I started leaving small things behind. Not packing them, just abandoning them where they didn't belong. A worn-out flannel left on the patio chair overnight. My razor still plugged in next to the sink for days. A box of my tools left by the back door even though I hadn't used them. I told myself it was forgetfulness, but deep down I knew the truth. I was rehearsing absence. I wanted to see how invisible I could become in my own home before she noticed. Spoiler, she didn't. Not once did she ask why my coat was soaked with dew in the morning, or why there was a dent in the couch cushion long after I'd left it. I'd sit in the garage for hours with the door half cracked, the light off, watching dust float through the sunbeams like I was already gone. I wasn't even hiding from her anymore. I was hiding from myself, from the version of me that still hoped she might return to the man she once loved. One afternoon, I watched her from the second floor as she stood in the driveway, holding her phone a little too tightly, pacing in lazy circles like someone trying to end a conversation without ending the night. I saw her laugh, a kind of laughter that didn't belong to me anymore. It had been exported, repurposed, and leased to another man whose name I didn't even know. I didn't feel rage. I felt emptiness. Not sadness, not betrayal. Just this stunning vacancy. Like I was watching a life I used to star in, but had since been recast. I could have burst through the door. I could have screamed or begged or sobbed. But instead, I made a sandwich. Turkey and mustard. 2 slices of dry wheat bread. And I ate it standing over the sink, staring into the drain, while the woman I loved gave pieces of herself away a few feet outside. That night, I opened a notes app on my phone and created a list. Titled it, Things I'll Take With Me. I added 3 items. My grandfather's watch. The Polaroid from Big Sur. My dog's ashes. That was it. Everything else could stay. You know how terrifying it is to realize you can leave an entire life behind and not even miss most of it? What does that say about the life? What does that say about you? She came home later than usual. Smelled like hotel soap again. Didn't kiss me. Didn't ask about dinner. She microwaved leftovers in silence, sat at the dining table scrolling through her phone, and when I looked at her, really looked at her, I noticed something I couldn't unsee. She was glowing. Not makeup, not lighting. Something from inside her had reignited, like a pilot light that had been relit after years of burning too low. And it wasn't because of a promotion or personal growth or therapy. No, it was him. The man I'd never met, but somehow hated with every ounce of my being. Not because he took her from me, but because he made her forget I ever existed. You can't compete with a ghost version of yourself. You can't outlove someone who's already replaced your name in their prayers. The next morning, I got up before sunrise. Didn't turn on the lights. Didn't make a sound. I stood in the hallway outside our bedroom and watched her sleep. One leg half draped outside the covers, her mouth slightly open, breathing softly like she hadn't been breaking me piece by piece every day for months. I took a photo, not out of sentiment, but so I could remember what it looked like before the switch flipped, before she realized I was gone. Because that moment was coming, and it wouldn't involve a fight, or a letter, or a slammed door. I was going to vanish in the middle of the night. Quiet, clean, surgical. She deserved the silence she gave me, and I deserved to finally hear myself think again. There's a kind of freedom that comes with pretending to still be in love. It's sick, I know, but once you let go, I mean truly let go, of the illusion that this person still belongs to you, it unlocks something twisted and terrifying inside. You stop reacting. You stop clinging. You stop begging the universe to send you a miracle through her smile. You just observe, like a scientist watching a storm through glass, taking notes while everything collapses quietly on the other side. She still thought I was choosing her every day. Still thought I was the same spineless fool making coffee every morning and waiting for her to come home from her strategy meetings. Still thought I was folding laundry and vacuuming and buying almond milk because she liked the taste better. And I was doing all those things. But not for her. I was rehearsing normalcy so that when I left, she wouldn't see it coming. Every morning, I picked something to remove from the house. One day it was my grandfather's shaving kit, tucked into the lining of my duffel bag in the trunk. Another day, the flash drive with all my documents. My signed baseball. A pair of boots. I did it slowly, like a reverse burglary, taking pieces of myself out of the house without leaving fingerprints. It was surprisingly easy. She never noticed. She had no idea I was unbuilding myself. I even started leaving money in the glove box of my truck. Cash I'd been pulling out of our joint account in quiet doses. Nothing big. Just enough. Just in case she tried to freeze anything when she realized I was gone. It wasn't just about escape. It was about not needing her reaction at all. I didn't want closure. I didn't want her to fall to her knees and say she made a mistake. I wanted to evaporate. Leave her holding a version of me she couldn't explain to anyone. No warning. No goodbye. Just silence. Then came the test. One Saturday, she told me she was going to visit her sister out of town. Normally, I would have offered to drive her to the station. Carried her bag. Hugged her tight before she left like some faithful golden retriever husband. But this time, I simply said, okay, have fun. She seemed surprised. Like she was expecting resistance. Maybe even guilt. But I gave her none. I gave her permission. And the way her eyes lit up made me sick. I watched her pack from the hallway, her phone lighting up the bed as she folded her sweaters and smiled down at it between zips. She was texting him. I didn't need to read the screen. I could tell from her body language, the way her toes curled with excitement, the bounce in her shoulders, the hum in her throat she didn't realize was there. That night, she left around 7 p.m. By 7:20, I knew she wasn't going to her sister's. I drove. Not after her. I wasn't interested in catching them. I was interested in choosing peace before I forgot what it looked like. I drove to the state line, booked a room at a motel with paper-thin walls, and just sat on the edge of the bed, listening to strangers argue through the wall while I stared at the TV on mute. It was the best sleep I'd had in months. The next morning, I came back before she did. I took my time, made coffee, tidied the kitchen, washed the one plate I used. She walked in just before noon, hoodie pulled tight, sunglasses still on indoors, like she was trying to hide the brightness in her eyes. She kissed my cheek and said, "Miss me?" I smiled. Of course. And that was the exact moment I knew I was ready. Ready to leave without warning. Ready to leave without her guilt. Ready to let her discover my absence the way I discovered hers, in the little things that went silent far too long ago. I think it's funny how the house kept trying to tell me to go before I was ready to listen. A small crack had appeared in the kitchen ceiling, just above the sink, like a vein splitting open from stress. The basement lights started flickering, even after I changed the bulb twice. The hallway closet door wouldn't shut properly anymore, even though it used to fit perfectly flush. I noticed it all. The imperfections, the silent shifts, the things that no longer aligned. Just like us. She didn't notice. Or maybe she did, and just didn't care. Either way, the house felt like it was grieving with me, sagging under the weight of everything left unsaid between its walls. I would run my hand over the dining table we never sat at anymore, press my palm against the refrigerator where her favorite magnets used to be, step carefully around the creaky stair that only I remembered to avoid. I had already begun saying goodbye. Not loudly, not dramatically, just internally. Quiet farewells to inanimate things. Goodbye to the window she always forgot to lock. Goodbye to the teacup with the tiny crack she refused to throw away. Goodbye to the way her robe used to smell when it hung in the hallway. Goodbye to the version of myself who still thought any of it could be saved. I was a ghost, haunting the space she once shared with me. But unlike most ghosts, I was self-aware, and I had an escape plan. She was more reckless now, less careful. Her overconfidence was almost insulting. She texted him in the same room as me, smiled at her phone while I sat across from her, pretending not to see. One night, I walked into the kitchen unexpectedly, and she jumped, not because I startled her, but because she hadn't heard me come down. She quickly flipped her screen and smiled like I hadn't just caught her flinch. That smile. It was like an actor breaking character for a beat, then diving back into the role. I let her pretend. I even kissed her cheek and offered her tea. She declined, too shaken to maintain the illusion, even though she thought I didn't notice. But I did. I noticed everything now. I started erasing myself from systems next, closed our shared Amazon account, transferred my old email address off our streaming services, quietly removed myself from every password manager. She didn't notice. She wouldn't until it was too late. That was the point. I even gave her a gift that week. A small necklace. Simple, silver, nothing too dramatic. I watched her expression as she opened it, the guilt in her eyes flickering briefly before she smiled and said, "It's beautiful." But her voice cracked at the end. Not from joy, from confusion. She didn't understand why I was being kind, why I was still trying. She didn't realize it was goodbye disguised as devotion. You see, I didn't want to leave with anger. I wanted to leave with clarity. I wanted the last chapter to be written in my hand, not dictated by her betrayal. She had already rewritten our story behind my back, changed the genre from romance to deception without asking me to turn the page. So this ending? It was mine. She went out again that Friday night, claimed it was for a coworker's birthday, wore heels she hadn't worn since our second anniversary, spent nearly 40 minutes on her hair. I didn't ask who, didn't ask where, just smiled and said, "Drive safe." She hesitated at the door, looked at me for a beat too long. Maybe she sensed something. Maybe not. Maybe it was her own guilt making ghosts where there were none. The moment she left, I walked upstairs, opened the closet, and took the duffel bag I'd packed weeks ago. Everything I needed was already inside. I placed it on the bed, sat beside it, took one last look at the room that used to be ours, and realized it hadn't felt like mine in months. That night would be her last time coming home to me. She just didn't know it yet. It happened on a Sunday, not because of symbolism or timing or some poetic closure wrapped in a weekend sunrise. It happened on a Sunday because she told me she'd be gone all day. Brunch with coworkers, then a gallery thing, she said, not even pretending to add enough detail to make it believable. I just nodded, as if her words still carried the weight they used to. She left before 10 a.m., wearing that pale blue sweater that always made her look like winter air. Crisp, distant, hard to touch. I watched from the window, sipping coffee I didn't even want, as she drove off without looking back. She had no idea she'd never see me again. I moved slowly, not because I was nervous, but because I wanted to savor it. The finality, the freedom, the quiet weightlessness of a choice that no longer had to be postponed. For the first time in months, my body didn't feel like it was wrapped in barbed wire. I could breathe, not shallow and tight like before, but deep, like I had more than enough air for once. The bag was already packed. Clothes, documents, cash, the essentials. I grabbed the flash drive with my business files, the watch from the drawer, the Polaroid from the bookshelf, and the small velvet pouch that held my dog's ashes. That was it. Nothing more. Everything else, the life, the furniture, the shared memories, the plants we kept killing and reviving together, all of it stayed. I wasn't taking souvenirs from a story that was never truly mine. I left no note, no cryptic message, no last words. Not because I was trying to be cruel, but because she didn't deserve a finale. This wasn't a breakup. This was a disappearance. People who rob you of your peace don't get closure. They get silence. And I was finally fluent in silence. I went room by room, turned off lights, closed drawers, smoothed the bed one last time. The details weren't for her, they were for me, so that I could walk away knowing I didn't burn the house down on my way out. I wasn't going to be the villain in the story she retold to whoever came next. She could say what she wanted, spin it how she needed, claim confusion, play the victim. Let her. I was done holding the narrative together. Just before I left, I stood at the front door with my hand on the knob for a long time. Not frozen, not unsure, just saying goodbye the only way I knew how. Quietly. No dramatics. No last glance. The house smelled like her, shampoo and vanilla, and something sweet that used to make me feel safe. But now it felt foreign, like someone else's home I had wandered into by mistake. I locked the door behind me, slid the key into the mailbox, and walked down the street like I was running an errand. I didn't look back. Not once. She would come home that night and find everything as she left it. Almost. The absence wouldn't punch her in the face right away. It would creep in. Subtle. The coat missing from the hook. The toothbrush gone. The familiar weight missing from the other side of the bed. It wouldn't feel like abandonment. Not at first. It would feel like a glitch. Like something out of place that her brain would keep trying to correct. Until she realized it wasn't a mistake. It was the final chapter closing on a story she thought she controlled. Maybe she'd call. Maybe she'd text. Maybe she'd drive around town like I had vanished into smoke. But I wouldn't be anywhere she could reach. Because for the first time since the day she started pulling away, I'd chosen me. And I was already too far gone to explain why. 3 weeks passed before I heard anything. I changed my number. Got a new email. Deleted my social accounts and rebranded my small woodworking business under a different name. Nothing dramatic, just enough to fall off the grid without vanishing completely. I wasn't trying to become someone else. I was just finally letting myself become me, without having to fit inside the shell she built around us. The first message found its way through an old backup email I forgot was still active. The subject line was her name. No words in the body. Just a single question in the subject. Where did you go? I didn't reply. I stared at the screen for a long time, not because I wanted to say something, but because I didn't feel anything. No anger. No satisfaction. No ache in my chest. That absence of emotion, that beautiful, echoing calm, told me I had finally made it out. You'd think the world would feel smaller after walking away from someone you built your life around. But it was the opposite. Everything felt bigger. Like I'd been trapped inside a shrinking house, and now I was out in the open air again. My breaths came easier. My thoughts were quieter. I didn't need to check shadows for betrayal anymore. I rented a small cabin up north. Nothing fancy, just wood, windows, and quiet. I rebuilt my workshop out back and started crafting again. Real work. Pieces that took days, sometimes weeks. I'd wake up with the sunrise and go to bed when the stars came out, so in the best possible way. I began selling to local shops, under a name no one would trace. The orders were small. The clients were kind. No one asked me where I came from. They just cared about the work. That's all I ever wanted. To be valued for what I build, not just what I endure. Some nights, I'd sit on the porch with a mug of tea and let my dog's ashes rest on the railing beside me, like we were watching the woods together one last time. I'd talk out loud sometimes, not because I thought anyone was listening, but because silence had stopped being scary. It had become sacred. I never told anyone what happened. Not in full. A few friends reached out. I gave vague answers. We grew apart. Things ended. No bitterness. No twisted retellings. Just facts. Because I wasn't interested in poisoning the future with the past. I didn't need people to hate her. I didn't even need her to hurt. I just needed her gone. And now she was. One day, I walked into a small bookstore in town, and there was a woman behind the counter, reading a dog-eared novel, humming to herself with no awareness of the world around her. Her hum was off-key. No melody. Just pure, absent-minded joy. I didn't know her. But I remember thinking, that sound doesn't belong to anyone but herself. It was the most beautiful thing I'd heard in years. And that's when I knew I was healed. Not because I had found someone new, but because I could finally witness someone else's joy without feeling like I had to perform to deserve it. This wasn't a love story. It was an escape story. And the hero didn't win by conquering anything. He won by walking away. Without warning. Without goodbye. And without regret.